Welcome to Fear and Greed, the week ahead. This is where we take a look at the big events, reports and releases coming up this week that give insight into the economy and a look back at what happened last week too. I'm Sean Aylmer, and every Monday I'm joined for the week ahead by economist Stephen Koukoulas. You'll find him at thekouk.com, thekouk.com, and on Twitter using the handle thekouk. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Last week, the Reserve Bank board meeting was, quite a damp squib, but it wasn't quite as exciting as you might have liked.
No, they kept the policy settings completely unchanged. The desire to sort of wind back their quantitative easing was still in place. They pushed back the timing to February 2022, but basically they didn't do much. And when you read the commentary that they put out as well, they are looking at this current lockdown recession, if we can call it that, this September quarter GDP being about minus 4%, so it seems, as just literally an air pocket, that it's just, for obvious reasons, people aren't spending, business investments being postponed. But they were saying that once we get to the kickoff in, say, 2022, and well and truly the lockdowns have ended, vaccination rates are at hopefully 80% and above, that we'll be back on that growth path that we saw in the first half of the year. Growth will be strong, the labour market will recover, CapEx will pick up again, and we'll be returning to this strong growth path. That's their current view, and that's why they left policy rates unchanged. I would note, however, that unchanged policy still means that monetary policy is extremely easy.
Yeah, but the point, I suppose, being the bias is definitely to start tightening at some point. And we're not talking about interest rates here. We're talking about purchases of bonds.
Yes, they've still got that at the back of their mind. They've just pushed it back a couple of months, basically, because of the couple of month downturn that the lockdowns are causing. But they're upbeat. They're still looking at the tightness in the labour market as being a factor that hopefully pushes up wages. Obviously, they've been disappointed with that June quarter result that we saw just recently. But what they were saying last week was some optimism that the structure of the economy is still sound, that policy is still easy, and that with households having saved a lot of money, there's pent-up demand out there, and even the opening up of intra-state borders, but then interstate borders, hopefully in coming months, we'll see people, get in their car, get on planes, use the gorgeous summer weather to go out and about and spend, and at least have the domestic side of the economy picking up.
And the Reserve Bank's not alone. The European Central Bank last week hinted that it was, Christine Lagarde, the head, made some great comment about this lady's not for tightening or something along those lines. But,
yes.
They're hinting at heading down that path. Certainly officials from the US Fed Reserve are the same. So there is a bit of a general global move away from this incredibly accommodative monetary policy. They're not really doing much yet, but they're talking about it at least.
Yeah, they're looking over the horizon and can see that this incredibly easy stance of monetary policy may not be needed for another year or two. And again, like here, it's not so much talk of hiking official interest rates and the overnight cash rate. It's more winding back the quantitative easing program, which are really still very aggressive in Europe and even in the US. That the discussion now is what order is the returning to normal monetary policy, if we can term it that way, is going to be. And of course, the first thing that seems to be on most central banks' agenda is scaling back the QE. Rate hikes are still later rather than sooner, but let's just end this QE. Let's stop the distortion, I suppose, of the bond market, which actually has been very helpful in supporting the recovery. But the global growth story is pretty good. You look at commodity prices outside iron ore, which of course is a special case and very dear to us here, but other commodity prices, aluminium, copper, are really buoyant, and that's a sign, I suspect, that the global economy is starting to pick up.
Well, that's last week. We'll be back in a moment and get into the week ahead. I'm with economist Stephen Koukoulas, aka The Kouk. Stephen, the Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe is speaking this week.
He's giving a talk at the Annika Foundation, his annual talk to that wonderful charity that was set up for dreadful circumstances. Read about it on the RBA webpage. But he's giving a talk on the economy, and it's usually a pretty good speech. That the history of governors Lowe, Glenn Stevens speaking at this event is that they actually present a bit of a fearless and frank discussion on their views on the economy. They get grilled by a lot of smart market economists as well. So it's really an opportunity for him to put some flesh on what was put out last week when the RBA, as we were just saying, left rates on hold. And his assessment of the economy, in a sense, it's not really a discussion this time about monetary policy, but it's more about where will the economy be when these lockdowns end. And I think that's going to be the thing that he'll be wanting to outline. When will the labour market be back at full employment? When will we see wages growth start to pick up? And importantly, is he really optimistic that inflation will return to the 2 to 3% band? I don't know the answers yet, but well, I'm sure I'll be watching along with many other people.
You mentioned the labour market there. It's a big week for the labour market.
It is. We've got the August numbers coming out, and these are the ones that I think will capture the partial effects of these lockdowns. Gosh, it's a really tough call to make. These monthly labour force numbers at the best of times are a bit of a lottery, but with what's going on in the economy now, it's pretty tough. We do get the weekly payrolls numbers from the Bureau of Stats. They do look at some of the tax office data to see who's working and who's not working. And my good mates at Westpac actually are good at analysing that and sort of superimposing that on the official labour force numbers. They've got employment dropping by about 175,000 in the month.
Wow.
So a big fall, of course, concentrated in New South Wales, Victoria, and to some extent in the ACT. But it's going to be a big fall in employment, whether it's 100, 175 or 200, we're not sure, but it'll really be just the labour market responding to what is clearly a significant lockdown across more than half of the country.
And the National Australia Bank Business Survey is also out.
Yes, probably going to be weak again. The optimism that we saw in the NAB survey back in May, June has been replaced by, for all the obvious reasons, some weakness there. It'll be just interesting to see how, I won't say gloomy, but how cautious I suspect the business sector is. And the NAB survey do ask a few more forward-looking questions. Will the business sector say, look, conditions now are pretty grim, but we're optimistic about the future? I think that split between current conditions and the outlook will be something that'll be worth looking at in the NAB survey.
And the other thing, Stephen, we get some details about immigration over the last few quarters.
Yes, and look, it's not normally something that economists spend much time looking at in detail, not in the short term, but we've seen, obviously, with the border closures, that Australia's population growth has been reverting almost to zero. We're still having a few babies on average. There's still a few more births than deaths. So natural population increase is still small positive. But the last few quarters have shown that there are more people leaving Australia than are coming in. So we've actually had the net immigration negative. So these numbers that we'll be seeing later this week will show, are we still seeing net immigration turning into an outflow of people? That you might think, well, who cares in a sense, but it really matters in terms of underlying demand in the economy. The supply of labour is important because, of course, we're not having any foreigners come in, or many foreigners coming in to fulfill these skilled vacancies. And it also has implications for housing. We're building a lot of houses right now, but population growth is basically zero. When these houses are finished, who's going to live in them? That's the one question that I think will be added to these population data and something that's important for housing.
It's a big week, Stephen. Enjoy it.
A huge one. Can't wait.
That was economist Stephen Koukoulas, better known as The Kook. You can find him at thekook.com and follow him on Twitter using the handle The Kook. I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is Fear and Greed, the week ahead.